First of all, let me say this before we even get started today. There is no perfect person, perfect man, perfect woman, perfect parents, perfect church, perfect leader as we come out of this crazy election season. There is no perfect person. And so today, one of the things that I want to talk about, because there is this inclination that so many young people and teens get caught up in sex trafficking because there is this idea that they were introduced to what seems like a perfect person. Today, y'all, we are going to talk about, we're going to shine some light on hidden darkness. And that means we're going to get into a conversation about sex trafficking. No, y'all getting tired of me talking about sex? Doesn't matter what I've been called to do, guys. And so I want to break the assumption that everybody understands sex trafficking. Break the assumption that every parent knows that it's important to talk to their kids about sex trafficking. I want you to use this particular episode as an encouragement, as a motivator, as a community asset to be able to talk to our teens, our young people about the ins and the outs and the basics of what we call sex trafficking. Now, before we get into this very tense conversation, I want to give you guys some quotes that I found to let you know just how important this conversation is. John F. Kennedy said, "Children are the world's most valuable resource, and it's our best hope for the future." I found, y'all know I love my Bible quotes, in Proverbs 22:6 in the NIV version. It says, "Start children off in the way they should go. Even when they are old, they won't turn from it." Matthew 19:14 says, Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me. Do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to these." And so I wanted to just get into it a little bit. Let me tell you guys a little bit of a research I did. So according to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, in 2021 alone, they received 17,200 reports of suspected child abuse relating to trafficking. You hear what I just said? 17,200 reports. And that was just in 20. I tried to do a little research to see if I could find something newer, but the data right now only goes through 2021. They are preparing the reports now for 2023. Unfortunately, I don't think those numbers are going to look better. So that's why I wanted to take the time to have a conversation about this particular issue. Check this out, y'all. According to the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, their 2022 global report on trafficking from an in-person snapshot, it shows that during COVID-19, covering 141 countries, y'all not going to believe this, the report highlighted that almost 20% of trafficking victims were children. That means under the age of 18, guys. And that was on an international level. And so the 2024 trafficking report by the U.S. Department of the United States estimates that around 27 million people globally are exploited for labor services relating to commercial sex. Now, I didn't get a chance to pull the numbers, but I know right here in Georgia, we are always mindful. I remember a couple of years ago, I helped host at the airport for the Super Bowl. And that was one of the number one training classes, guys, that we had to take. We had to learn what to look for and what to pay attention to make sure that there were not instances of sex trafficking, because during busy events like the Super Bowl, a lot of traffickers will use that time to try to slip individuals through the airports to try to get them to go unnoticed because there's such a large crowd. So we are always here in Georgia. There's always reports. There's always things throughout the airport that I've seen that are asking you to be mindful, pay attention, watch. So it is unfortunately an issue that is here, and that is an issue that we have to deal with now. And there is no label to the children, the young people that are facing targeting through trafficking. A lot of people, I was told, especially through online, that's a biggie. A lot of teens and young people are targeted, guys. And that's why I started at the top of the show when I said there is no perfect person. It's so weird. As I was doing my research, I kept reading over and over again that one of the main things that captures our kids and is them thinking they can get this ideal life. Like this person convinces them that they can have this ideal person, this ideal boyfriend, ideal relationship, this ideal career, this ideal job. And so that's why we have to be mindful to teach our young people there is no perfect person. There's no perfect situation for you to be in. And the reason I'm encouraging parents and community leaders that we have to start teaching our children that, because how is it that the traffickers are able to convince them that there is a such thing as a perfect life? And so break it down, parents, break it down, youth leaders, community leaders, give the children ideas, even if it's some of your own ideas that you have to share with them, or some of the things that you've dealt with yourself. But you've got to kill that narrative that there is a perfect life, a perfect situation. Because again, that's how a lot of our kids are falling prey to a lot of the traffickers. All right, so let's get into some meat of this. So this show today, we're going to talk about practical advice and faith-based insight. Parents and youth leaders can talk to our teens and our young people about sex trafficking. Now, what I wanted to do is I am never going to do this show and assume that people know anything. Heck, I didn't know. And so what I did was I found a basic definition to describe sex trafficking. And so the definition, this is from DHS.gov, and it said that sex trafficking is when someone uses force, fraud, or coercion to make another person engage in commercial sex. It says for anyone under 18, that's why it has the term sex trafficking. Because basically, if you're under 18, you're not really able to give consent. And so that's where that terminology came from in relating it to trafficking. It says that it's a serious crime and it can happen to anyone, regardless of your background or where you live. So it's not just happening to kids on the street, as we probably sometimes assume. It's not happening just to kids who are in a single parent household, as we sometimes assume. It has no zip code. It has no telephone number. It has no address. All teens and youth are unfortunately being affected by this particular issue. Don't know yet if it's considered something that will gain more. Sometimes the more it hits certain addresses and neighborhoods and communities, it gets a lot more conversation. But I think it's time to have the conversation now before it gets more out of hand than it already has. So how can you open a conversation with your teens without causing fear? Because sometimes we make the kids a little bit anxious and so one of the things that I think you consider is the language. The same language I'm using for my 22-year-old niece is not the same language I'm going to use with my 15-year-old nephew. You need to do some research, even talk to maybe some child psychologists. Google, you can find anything you need on Google. And maybe what you can do is Google some things and find out what's the best language to use to talk to our children about sex trafficking without causing fear. Type that in. How to talk to my child about sex trafficking without fear. This AI generation, it will give you everything that you need, including reading resources. It'll, give you some items you can go check out from the library. Do your research. on this subject before you talk to your kids or your nieces or mentees, mentors, because again, you don't want the kids to be afraid, but you do need to have the conversation. And so you got to stay positive in your message. Like, don't approach it from the standpoint of you're automatically assuming that this may happen to your child. Do that. But let them know that because there are so many hidden doors, social media, and there are so many entities that try to approach, whether that be in person or, in other avenues to try to create a friendship, maybe talk to them from the standpoint, the importance of understanding what it means to be a friend, what it means to be a BFF. Go back to start explaining to them what a stranger, how to be careful, how to be cautious when they. And so the goal is, like I mentioned, just make sure that you keep the message positive. Because again, you don't want to make them afraid, have the conversation, but you also don't want to scare them as well. Another thing that I want you guys to do, be open. You got to have open dialogue. Ask them, have they ever had a situation of know of anyone who has had a situation relating to sex trafficking? See what they know. Don't just assume that they don't know, but don't also assume that it's a one-sided conversation. Have some open dialogue. Another thing I want to is the educational approach. If you don't know, learn. It is okay not to know how to have the conversation. But again, we have so many resources to us in this society today that there is no reason for us not to be able to have resources to reach out, have these pivotal conversations. And then I want you to empower them, help them to understand and identify and be able to even talk to some of their friends about it. Empower them to know that it's okay to be watchful. Empower them to know to say, if they're online talking to someone, they can sense those red flags based on the conversation and realize this may be a conversation they shut down. Help them to be empowered to say no. Always have to say yes to everything on social media. Shut them down. Help them to understand the empowerment of doing that. Help them to understand everybody on social media. One of my pet peeves that drives me crazy, you are not my friend just because we're on social media. Help them to understand what the definition of friendship is. I have a friend to this day. We've been friends since the 8th grade, thick and thin. We know each other. And so there is this belief system that because we connect on social media, this is my friend. You don't know nothing about that person yet. But that's one of the triggers that get our children in trouble when they're in these social media sites and these chat rooms and these groups having these conversations. They find something that feels familiar to them. And before they know it, they're caught up in some conversation. I don't know if you guys saw it or not here in Georgia. I'm not saying that's what the situation is, but there was a story that was all over the news this week. These parents were looking for their child. They couldn't find her, didn't know what was going on. I guess police got involved and come to find out they just said she was fine. They still don't know to this day if there was possible trafficking involved, but evidently the young lady had been talking to someone possibly that we're not familiar with. And so sometimes it starts just that simple when they're chatting with people and made to feel comfortable. And that's how it starts. Y'all, it ain't super deep. It starts just that conversation. Another thing that I wanted to do, guys, I wanted to help you to understand why does it specifically target teens and young adults? Well, a lot of it I've already mentioned. The vulnerability. They're talking to someone online who seems nice, who seems friendly, who seems personable, who seems like they can get along with them, and they automatically tell them too much business. They start telling them where they live. They start telling them about their family, their friends, their schools, their parents. And so they open themselves up in a vulnerable way that puts them in a situation where they have exposed themselves potentially to someone who needs them the. And so teach them when you're going through that approach of talking to them about conversation, talk to them about the vulnerability. Let them know, listen, it may be a good idea. You're talking to these people.
You just met these people on, tell them everything. Find out some things about them, because in my research, that's another thing that I learned. When someone is targeting your teens online in these chat groups and these, they want to tell them as little as possible about themselves. They don't always use the right names. They don't want to tell them what city or state they're from. They don't do open-ended questions. They basically want to just find out as much as they can about that teen so that they can present themselves in a way helpful to the teen, especially those getting bullied in school. Some of our kids who are extremely quiet sometimes at home, sex traffickers prey on them. And so they try to find teens' weaknesses and try to turn them as a strength to make it seem like they help them. And then that's how they. I know it sounds simple. It sounded simple to me when I researched. And I was like, it's so many kids in this situation that it maybe we're missing the simplicity part of it, which is just having a conversation with us about. Another thing that they do is they go after runaways and kids who are homeless. Now, all homeless kids are not sleeping on the streets, or, some kids go and stay with their friends because they may have a complicated situation. You have kids that are in foster care. Those are the kids that they target. Kids who feel like they can't be loved in their kids who feel like they don't have a stable home. They are targeted to, in a way, to try to make them feel like they can help them. They can be their source of stability in their life. And so online presence, that was, keep bringing that up. Again, in all of my research, everything took me back to the biggest area that the teens are targeted is on the chat rooms, the groups, just reaching out, sending, friend requests to them, and kids are accepting it. Those are the highlighted areas that the agencies talked about. And so I know it's not a popular thing for some of your parents, especially for some of your age of 18. You may want to get back into some of their social media usage, especially again in those groups and those chats. I know it's not popular. I know they're going to be mad at you, but it might be something you consider, because again, as we look into this particular issue, the numbers are only increasing. And remember what I said, they have no address. There is no ideal person. Sex trafficking targets every single person and especially those teens. All right. So the other thing that it targets is economic harms. Oh my goodness. When I was in high school, that's the bug the heck out of my mom and dad, because I didn't just want allowance. I wanted to make my own. I wanted to stop, having to wash the dishes just to get some money. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. Necessarily that I had a hardship, because I was raised in a 2-parent household. I just wanted to have my own. And that's another area that when they're talking to our team online and in person, it's not necessarily those who don't have, it's those who even desire to have their own money. And they tap into that, try to convince us, well, if I can give you a job, if you come work with me, you can make all the money you work. Now, they ain't telling about the traps now. They're tapping into that need of that teen or that young person feeling like they have an economic hardship. So keep that in mind. Gotta kill stereotypes of what you feel like trafficking looks to you. Remember, say it repeat. It does not have a face. It does not have a face. It does not have a specific look. What it does have is how it traps so many kids year after year because of those. So, what are some red flags that teens should be aware of? Their interactions with both individuals online and offline. So as far as online, if it sounds too good to be true, means it is. If it sounds like they'll promise you the world and you can get it in 3-4 days, that's too good to be true. Don't fall for it. Delete, unfriend, don't want to talk to you, get rid of it. Get rid of the request. Don't have any more conversations with it. Okay? If the stories are inconsistent, yesterday when you talked to them, they mentioned to you that they were a professional in the music industry. The next day they're an attorney. The next day they're a broke college student. If the stories are too inconsistent when you're communicating with them online, delete them, block them, don't talk to them, shut it down. Not to say that it could only be a trafficker. You might be talking to somebody that's just a liar, but don't take any chances. So if the stories that they're telling you and talking to them are inconsistent, block them. Secretive behavior. They don't want to tell you nothing. I mentioned this earlier. They don't want to tell you anything about themselves. They only want to know everything about you. They're using that as a trap, get you to be vulnerable so that you will agree to meet them in person. So if they don't want you to tell your parents, like all of a sudden, don't tell your parents we're talking, tell any of your friends who I am, that's a red flag. And that's some of that secretive behavior that you need to mind of, young people. Careful. Your parents not just telling you that just to sound like a broken record. You gotta be careful. Another thing, if they are asking you for too much personal information, where do you live? Where do you go to school? What do you do on the weekends? When do you and your friends hang out? Where do y'all hang out? They're asking you a lot of personal information. In my research, what I found out is they want you to be vulnerable quickly because sex trafficking, fortunately, is such a huge industry that they try to get as many teens and many young people as possible so they can make as much money. Because see, for them, it's all about money. And so they're trying to get as much personal information out of as fast as possible so that they can get you out of your safe space with your family and your kids. And so you got to be mindful of that. What I say, block them. They're doing too much. If they pressure you to meet you in person, they want you to sneak out your parents' house. They tell you they want to meet you in person, but they don't want you to tell anybody who you're meeting, where you're going, what time. They pressure you to meet them somewhere isolated. They don't want you to meet them. From my research, they don't want you to meet them around a lot of people. So a lot of times they will even encourage you to sneak out your parents' house. They'll encourage you to stay after school late and they'll pick you up from school. These may sound like some simple things in your ears, guys, but this is what's getting a lot of kids caught up in traffic. Another thing that was surprising to me is they will try to get you to send inappropriate pictures to them. Friend, why I gotta send you some inappropriate pictures? Like, that's a humongous red flag. Don't do it, because what the research shows is they are taking your inappropriate photos and they are shopping them out in their circles to see who would be interested in being sexual with you. So be careful with these inappropriate pictures. Don't send them by text. Don't drop them off in person. Don't send them online. Do not send photos of yourself because, again, you don't know who you're sending them in and you don't know who they're sending them to. Right? And then sudden friend requests. Now you send these pictures, you've already been vulnerable. Then all of a sudden you start getting like a humongous number of friend requests. And you're getting them from different people, different ages, different backgrounds. That's because, unfortunately, what has happened is that the person that you have been talking to that you thought had your best interest at heart has been shopping you around some groups and some sites. You've been getting shopped around. And now what's happening is these people are trying to make you even more vulnerable. So they're reaching out to you to see what they can learn about you. So when you come in their space, they'll pretty much know what to expect. It's never about protecting you. Sex trafficking is all about protecting the person that's doing it. Sex trafficking, the people who do it, as well as the people who are selling, it's all about that industry. It's nothing about trying to protect you. So keep that in mind, young people. It ain't that your parents and your grandparents trying to run your life or tell you what to do. It's just there's a whole new arena of behavior that we just honestly didn't have to deal with before that you guys have to deal with now. And it's more exposed. And so they're not, don't let them trying to get on your nerves. They just keep you safe. And then I want to talk to you guys because evidently now there's a new thing where after they meet you, then there's some in-person behavior that goes outside of just being online. And so one of the things that it show overly controlling behavior. Now they want to know where you going, what you doing, why you ain't with me, why you going with them, who is that? Who like they just in person they want to know every single thing that you're doing. If you say I'm leaving the house, what time you'll be back, where you go, who you riding with, who is that picking you up? So they become extremely overly controlling of your in-person behavior. You guys meet face to face. Another thing, they want to start isolating you from your friends. That's a complete no-no. Don't ever let anybody shut you down from your friends and your family. That's your secret place, your safe place. Don't ever. That's like the biggest, hugest. If y'all want to make Miss Monica mad, don't ever do that. Don't ever let anybody completely shut you down, but you're isolated from everyone. That's a no. That's a no, y'all. Do that. And then, like I said, there is no perfect thing. They start promising you this perfect, better life if you just get with them. That's a red flag. Artificial information. Okay? Don't fall. Don't fall for the hype. If they give you inconsistent identification, y'all, that came up like 4 or 5 times when I was doing the research on this particular subject. They never give you consistent anything. Never. Don't ask to see their driver's license. They're not going to show it to you. They might change their first name, their middle name, their last name, the type car they drive, the address. They might take you to an apartment one day. They take you to a house the next. The information is always inconsistent. Okay? And then, I tell y'all, I told y'all there is no perfect person. Now, listen, I just had someone come up to me today and said, girl, every time I see you be rocking them different hairdos. Thank you. Left it at that. But if they are excessive in complimenting, listen, you're a beautiful person inside out. But if somebody is just excessively always complimenting you, especially your body shape, your body angles, front side, your back side, okay, that's a little too much because now I mean you trying to size me up to see about something sexual. Because nobody, with the exception of if it's your husband, okay, then I get a husband a pass, all right? But anybody else, if they are always talking about it, that's a little too much. Especially, again, if it's somebody that you just met, block them. Shut it down, walk away, call your mom and dad, call your auntie. If you can't get to your mom and dad, grandparents, aunties, uncle, get out of there ASAP. Another thing, if they put you in uncomfortable situations. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're supposed to be meeting them, I don't know, burger place or whatever. And all of a sudden, somebody else just shows up and sits down at the table. Then all of a sudden, somebody else shows up, sits down. Well, you don't know none of these people now, but the person that you're with is having conversations with these people, but has not said anything to you, hadn't introduced you, hadn't done anything. That's an example of an uncomfortable situation. Because what has happened is that person may have invited those people to size you up. You don't know if you finna get jacked. You don't even know if you're going to your parents going to see you again after you've been in that restaurant with them. That's an example of an uncomfortable situation. Stop being so close and so friendly so soon. Because unfortunately, that's how a lot of our kids are being taken advantage of. And then I want you guys be resistant. Like, don't ignore your boundaries. One of my pet peeves is if a stranger gets too close to me soon, I'm instantly moving over. I can be on a plane, y'all. And if I'm flying somewhere and the person next to me and I don't know them, they lean over, I'm leaning too. I'm real cautious of my space. And so that's a boundary that I'm not willing to change myself. And so, whatever boundary you have, just, pay attention. I'm not saying, like I said at the beginning, don't be afraid, but just pay better attention. Somebody is coming too close to you and feels uncomfortable. Step 3, go back 3 steps. Go to the left, go to the right. You don't have to say anything. And if you want to say something, but like, you know what? I'm so sorry. I have somebody when I'm talking and people be in my space. But don't be afraid to protect you. Don't let a stranger feel like they have that much control over your space that they feel like they can enter into it without your actual permission. You have a right to protect your space. You have a right to have boundaries. Even on social media, I know, they talk about everything. They say you have boundaries. You can say, look, I don't want to have this conversation, delete, block. I delete and block people so much, I don't even know why I'm still on social media. If I feel anything uncomfortable, I'm not going to have a conversation with you. I'm just going to counsel you. And some of you teens, you need to learn to do that. Everybody that's speaking favorable of you is not favorable with you. Everybody that's being kind, these strangers on social media, you have got to be careful. There are people in the world who unfortunately are looking to take it. And so you got to be willing. Not going to listen to your parents. Not going to listen to my mentor. Not going to listen, to your youth leaders, your community leaders. And you're going to have to grow up. You're going to have to put on, like my grandparents used to say, your big girl, your big boy underwear. And you're going to have to get a safe space that you're comfortable with so that you can protect it. There ain't nothing wrong with asking for help either. Because young people, if you are in a situation, sure, if this strength is trying to get you to do some things, please. The worst word that a lot of people hate to hear, humble and help. Like those 2 words we hate in this journey. But sometimes you got to be humble. You got to ask for help. So let somebody get out of that situation with that before you find yourself in a situation. Figure out how. So what I want you guys to, there are some public resources. Your family and yourself can. There's the National Human Trafficking Hotline. They can be reached at 1-888-373-7888. Again, that's the National Human Trafficking Hotline, 888-373-7888. Another agency that I is called Safe House Project, and they offer support for trafficking survivors. They offer emergency response and long-term care to help teens and young people get back on their feet after being a victim of trafficking. Another agency I found was Operation Underground Railroad. They had a lot. It was OUR. So it's Operation Underground Railroad. And they focus on helping victims be rescued from sex trafficking. And so all of these guys I was able to find on Google, at Microsoft, all of it is out there. I just did some things to help people who may find themselves in trafficking situations, and all of these organizations came up. The last one it was called Shared Hope International, and they actually help trafficking victims on a global scale. And so what they do is same thing. They provide resources if you're in there and trying to get out, if you are out and don't know where to start, but they will help you again on a global scale, because evidently there is this underground thing now where people are being targeted in one country and taken to other countries to be trafficked, because evidently there are some countries where the laws are different. And so some get caught faster than others. And so this particular agency, that's what they specialize in. And so what I want you guys to do before I close out this episode, I was uncomfortable talking about this at first. And I had even anticipated on having a guest on with me to walk me through this particular thing, but they were supportive enough. They couldn't make it, but they did share with me, some resources to look up and to use. And so I think that we have got to get to a space where every single subject should be on the table when it relates to sex in our. There is nothing that we should be assuming. There is nothing that we should be thinking our children are not doing. There is nothing we should be assuming that our kids already know. And that's why when I found the number so high in this particular conversation, I knew that we had to touch bases. We had to talk about it. And so I am encouraging you to get involved in your, get this in your churches, get this in your youth groups. When you're together for, coming up, I know we're in the holiday season now. Talk to your children and your young people about it. Again, don't scare them, but let's talk about it and let's deal with this. Will we make this go away? Probably not. But can we possibly save some children if they knew the signs to look for? I believe we can. We mentor some children to make smarter decisions when they go to school and, when they're meeting people out in the mall and different. And so this is another pivotal conversation brought to you by mentors. I am so excited that you guys joined me today. And you know what? When you watch this episode, share some feedback. Let me know some things that you guys have found that are pivotal important to be able to talk to your young people as it relates to sex trafficking. Pay attention. Teach them how to pay attention. Help all of us. We're all learning. And no matter what you do, never, ever assume. All right, guys, until we meet again, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Happy holidays.